right. All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. Particularly important today as we gather, recognizing that February is Black History Month. And I want to begin by talking a little bit about some of that, but I am happy to see once again, we're joined by so many of our community leaders. I see Representative Lewis here. Good morning. And I see Hattie Kerwin from Newton and so many other folks who've been really founding members of this task force. And before I begin, Representative Lewis, anything you want to add? Or I know you've been out doing a lot in the community lately, seeing you everywhere. So anything?
I appreciate the opportunity, but no, nothing to add. And just
Okay.
grateful for all the work you're doing and all the work your team's doing. Not all of it is something that the average person realizes or sees. And I love these calls because sometimes even I learn of some of the important work that you're doing. So
Thank
thank
you.
you.
As I said, we're about to celebrate beginning to celebrate Black History Month. And that is a time to honor the resilience, the leadership, and the brilliance of our Black communities in Middlesex County and across the country. And to really think honestly about how racism shows up in so many of our systems. It's a chance to recommit to the fact that our work shouldn't just be about equity, but actually it advances the cause for Black residents who too often are on the front lines of hate and bias. I've been talking a lot lately about the things that have been happening on our streets. And, we've been heard a lot about Renee Good and Alex Preddy, who obviously tragically lost their life. But, we also don't want to miss the opportunity to talk about Mr. Porter, Keith Porter, a Black man who lost his life at the hands of some ICE agents, um, Carlos Santos, a Hispanic man who similarly met a terrible fate at the hands of ICE agents. And we don't want that to become a cause that leaves behind those Black and brown people who've also been caught up on that. And in that point, I want to talk a little bit about, and Representative Lewis with us in the last couple of weeks, we've had an opportunity to hear from the Black and Latino caucus here at the legislature, to stand with Governor Healy, to be with Mayor Wu. And as Governor Healy said, she was advancing what she calls one of the most comprehensive efforts in this country to shield sensitive locations. This is a principle that goes back hundreds of years, that idea that places, especially churches, should be places of sanctuary. And this legislation that the governor's proposed would not only reestablish that right, but also include places like courthouses, hospitals, schools, and it would ban ICE coming to do a administrative warrant arrest in any of those places. I mentioned last week when I spoke at one of these events that we've received information from members of our faith communities that people are sometimes not scheduling funeral services for members of their families because of their last name or the color of their skin or so many of those things. They know that that would be a place that reading obituaries that ICE might decide to visit. And that is clearly so far away from where we were. Um, and also at the press conference that Governor Healy had, we heard from so many doctors and mental health workers running, especially community clinics and community hospitals, about the people who are not showing up for appointments, for medication, whether for themselves or for their children. And that is a real threat, both to justice, to health, and to people's opportunity, especially now in a time when you may well be seeking spiritual guidance, to be able to go to those places that should be regarded as safe spaces. And similarly, at least in this county, Cambridge, Somerville, Newton, and Medford have passed similar kinds of ordinances protecting those spaces. And they are now with Governor Healy's proposal, as well as the proposal from the Black and Latino caucus, to be debated and voted upon in the legislature. So very significant changes over the last couple of weeks. On March 11th, we will host our second Empowering Citizens Conference. And as I've said before, while we have to do two things at once. We're doing all this work on the legislation. We are trying to bring our communities back to who we really are. But I don't want to lose sight of the message of hope and teaching people, particularly our young people, that there is a difference. And our empowering citizenship is really a piece of that. It seeks to foster civic engagement, leadership, participation among the students. We'll have a wonderful array of speakers led by Supreme Court Justice Sergey Georges. And it will focus again on the 10 obligations espoused in Richard Haass's book, The Bill of Obligation. Richard Haass, who you may remember is the president emeritus for the Council on Foreign Relations. He came and spoke at our first program and talked about the fact that I bet everybody on this call can name their 10 rights encapsulated in the Bill of Rights. And I had the opportunity last week, I've been talking about this a lot. I was in Washington and I went to the National Archives just to kind of remind myself of who we are, to look at those Bill of Rights. And we all know that, we all learned that we would fight to protect those. But Mr. Haass advances the proposition that we also have 10 obligations as citizens, as well as those 10 rights. And they include things like being of service, being civil, engaging in conversation and debate, going and voting. And so we talked, the first segment of our program taught the kids what those were. Now we're going to be talking with Justice Georges, with Joanna Lidgate, the CEO of States United Democracy Center, David McCullough's program, the American Exchange program, and really talking to kids about, even if you're 14, 15, what can you be doing? And we'll be using sort of a Hamilton model. They are in the room. We're going to be asking them to commit to, between now and the end of school, doing at least 3 things. Fairly easy things. Go to a local town meeting, register to vote if they're eligible to do that, shovel out a neighbor, be part of the community. And they're going to, as adopting the Hamilton model, they are going to put pen to paper and sign that they agree to do that. They will come back before the end of school, show us that they've done those things. We're really going to celebrate those kids. We really want to make this something that people want to do, that they see as part of their life, and they don't have to wait till they're grown up to begin being good citizens, that can start right now. One of the scariest parts of the first program, and any of you who have teenagers will know what this was, we asked the kids to get off their phones while we engaged in these conversations. I was afraid I'd have phones coming at me as Representative Lewis is on his phone. And they did. It was amazing. We had several hundred kids there. It was just really amazing. I think probably the piece that sticks with me the most was the kids who stood up and talked about the differing perspectives that they listened to on their Substacks every morning. That's a great thing. If we've got kids, it's one thing if you're not reading the newspaper, but if you're out there listening to a Substack and getting that information, really interesting piece. So we're looking forward to all of that. We'll send the link around to everybody. You'll be able to watch if you can't join us. And I also want to sort of calling back to our work, since we last met in December, we've seen some national trends and incidents that really underscore why this work is so important. In New York City, for example, the NYPD reported that anti-Jewish hate crimes jumped in January of this year. This is just shocking to me. In January of 2026, anti-Semitic incidents jumped 182%. That is staggering for a 1 month change. And anti-Semitic incidents made up more than half of all of the hate crimes reported in the city. And at the same time, across 47 states and the District of Columbia, we saw over 1,000 anti-LGBTQ plus incidents, with more than half of those were targeting either transgender or gender non-conforming people. So just really a sobering reminder. I read this morning, and I commend to you when thinking about this work, there is a op-ed piece in the Globe this morning that talks about how this administration has had so many issues with ICE, with lying about lots of different things and people being called into question and the Epstein files and all sorts of things. And what it says is that the one thing that President Trump always knows he can count on to rally his base is racism. That whenever things go badly, if, things are not looking good for him on the Epstein files, he will beat the racism drum. When things aren't looking good about the government shutdown, he will go back to racism. And so if you think about how important our work is to counter that kind of force, and somebody sitting in the White House being able to call up that kind of force, it really underscores again how important this is. So I'm grateful to have all of you here. We are fortunate to be joined today by two organizations that have been to the task force before, and have really deepened their reach and their impact over the last couple of years to face these challenges. Spark Kindness and Right to Be have been on the ground helping communities deal with hate, build inclusion, and give people practical tools, both to be good bystanders and to support one another. I'm grateful that they're back with us today. So all of this, the Black History Month recognition, the push to protect immigrants in sensitive spaces, and the conversations we've been having and will continue to have, really underscore what I see as my job. That is making sure that everybody's safety is protected, that everybody's story is getting heard, and that we are always asking, how do we reduce the number of people in Middlesex County who ever wonder if they belong here? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lynn Canty. Lynn is a core member of the Spark Kindness team. She's a leader in the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work. She helps communities to connect kindness with truth-telling and with justice. She is a writer, a facilitator, a community advocate. Her work seeks to do a lot of things to lift up Black history, racial equity, and the lived experience of marginalized communities. She has played a key role in developing Spark's educational resources and programming that seek to promote honest dialogue, courageous learning, and practical action. And Lynn is with us right now, and she's going to be joined by her coworker, Christine Fortune Guthrie, who is the founder and the executive director of Spark. And for those of you who don't remember, Spark is a Metro West nonprofit, launched in 2010, began to work against cyberbullying, I can't say that word, and really seeking to build kinder, more resilient, more inclusive communities. Christine is an attorney, a community leader, and she's grown Spark Kindness into a nationally recognized convener and educator. They offer free programs, resources, support for families, for schools, for organizations to respond to bullying, discrimination, mental health challenges, and online hate. And again, really looking for the same things we're talking about. How do you get to justice? And how do you get to creating that feeling of belonging? And I would also mention, for those of you who haven't been following, the first in the country big lawsuit against some of the tech companies for the social media platforms and the role that they are playing in all of this began yesterday with opening statements. So a number of families claiming the damage to their children's mental health, to the kinds of things that have happened. That's going to be a very important case as it unfolds over the next few weeks. So Lynn, thank you for being with us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. There's so much in your intro that I just want to say amen to. These times we are in it's so important, and I appreciate this task force for doing the work of convening and listening and also acting. I see Christine has joined. Just give her a minute to get situated. Again, thank you for having us back. I guess it's been a little over 2 years since we were here last, and we've been busy. So we're excited to be here again and excited to share the things that we have been doing and the things we look forward to in the future. Part of the core part of our work is listening to communities, and our model is one that is a community-based model that ask the question, how can we come together to solve some of these issues? How can we lean on each other? How can we work together? So as we go through this presentation, we want to know two things. How can we help you in what you're doing? How can we be a resource for you? And do you have any resources for us to add and share to continue to keep this work spread among all of us? So Christine, I don't know if you want to start, if you want.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. I'm so so honored to be here. Sorry to join a little bit late. I'm on a different computer. I had a complete computer meltdown this morning, but I am so happy to be here with all of you. And I'm going to try to share my screen here. I don't know if you all see that. Are we good? Okay. All right. So I know, thank you. And I heard some of what you were saying, DA Ryan. I think and it's so wonderful to have Antonia as part of our coalition and have the opportunity to talk to all of you today. So this is what we're going to be just quickly talking about, just reviewing what we've been doing as a coalition. As Lynn said, this is a lot about learning, really listening to the community. And then really what we're offering is based on what we've been hearing and learning from all of you. And then just the offer to join the movement. Lynn's going to be talking a bit about that. So what we've been doing, and some of you have been part of this, we received a grant from the Metro West Health Foundation. It was a 3-year grant, and the first year was really to start listening. And I know we spoke to you at the beginning of this process, and we started by doing coalition listening sessions. We've done curated programming that has been based on the needs, having conversations. Samir Hinduja is the head of the Cyberbullying Research Center. We've had the Attorney General's office speak about the new legislation addressing sexting and AI deepfakes. Lenny Learning, which is an organization that develops helps schools develop curriculum on these types of issues relating to behavioral health. We have led 2 anti-bullying forums. Lynn has been such a huge leader in presenting at those forums, but we've had the Attorney General's office and a number of different speakers for those. But it's also been an opportunity to convene everybody in person. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And really just listening, because one thing that we said at the beginning, and I know that that you all know from doing this work, is that hate has a real chilling effect, and bias has a real chilling effect on people coming forward to talk about it because of fear and a number of other factors. So really, we wanted to prioritize listening to people, both the people who are experiencing this, but the people that are serving them, on how we can better support. Some of the things we've learned are not going to be any of a surprise to any of you. We've heard a lot about, in terms of leaders who are addressing these issues, like all of the folks in this Zoom room, just a lot of isolation and overwhelm, both on the part of people who are targeted by hate and bias and by the people who are serving them. We've heard about how important it is to have community supports and resources. We've learned that when somebody's targeted by hate, for example, a student, it has a profound impact on them, emotionally, physically. It's very isolating, but it takes up so much of someone's emotional energy when they've been targeted that it's really hard to find support. It's something that adds to the level of isolation. So where to go? So if somebody is being targeted, and what if, the school isn't at the beginning, the school isn't super helpful in addressing it. What next? Where else to go? Where are the organizations that can help? Where to report it? that takes a lot of energy to find those answers. And so what we're trying to do with the coalition is put together resources that'll help the organizations that are serving folks and also help people who are targets. We've seen the need, and again, not saying anything that people here don't unfortunately know, we've seen the need continue to rise to address these issues. And like I said, the need for resources, and particularly for free resources, because often we're seeing people who are experiencing this. It's not the only challenge they're experiencing. Often there's also economic hardship as well. So how do we make things as easy as possible and help people feel that they're not alone at a time that can feel particularly lonely? Whenever you have been targeted for who you are, that is an absolutely isolating experience, and often the act is intending to make you feel isolated, to make you feel powerless, to make you feel vulnerable. So how can we stand there with people at that moment and the people who serve them? Does anybody have any questions about this? I can't see everything. I can see my screen. But at any time, if anybody has any questions or thoughts to add, I mean, we're going to have some questions for you in a minute, but maybe, just I'll quickly go through what we see. Actually, maybe I'd love some thoughts after I kind of go over this slide about what we're seeing from the schools in terms of the barriers to addressing hate and identity-based bullying. We've done some presentations to different groups, Lynn and I have, and we've asked for feedback. So this slide is based on some of the feedback that we've received from school leaders and counselors. When we ask, like, what are the barriers to addressing identity-based bullying and hate in the school? Lack of capacity is a huge thing. Obviously, educators are doing a million things. I mean, I know, Antonia, you work with a lot of and talk to a lot of schools and see, but like not having the time to deal with these very significant and complicated issues is a big part of it. Staff capacity and training, that there's a real disparity. There's some staff that are just really great at addressing these issues, and there are others that are less confident in doing that. And so providing training for them. And then clear procedures. There are procedures around bullying. Their schools have a bullying prevention intervention plan by law. There are general reporting requirements for bullying to DESE, but not really around issues of hate and identity-based bullying. How are those being tracked in schools? There's often a real difference, even within districts, of how different schools report or don't report these issues. And then challenges to working, when you ask the schools, well, what about the community coming in to help you? What are the barriers to that? Most of them said lack of time, that building relationships with the community partners is going to take time for them, figure out who they can trust, figure out who's going to be helpful. That was a big thing. And then the other two that we saw were lack of trust, and just who are the community partners, right? When you're kind of in your zone at the schools, you're not necessarily thinking about who are all the community supports out there. So that's some of the feedback. I'm wondering if there are thoughts among the group here about anything that I've missed, or anything that you're hearing from the schools around the barriers to addressing identity-based bullying and hate in the schools, and also to partnering with the community to address them.
Christine, I just want to add, because there's a question in the chat about where the data came from. In the group that this information was taken from, it was mostly school counselors. There were some resource officers, and I think it was mostly middle and high school teachers, those of the people that joined that were teachers, and administrators. Antonia.
Yeah, I think one thing I would add to this is what we haven't seen in the past as far as labeling, right? I think in the past, if you had kids that were bullying or doing things, there might be a sense from parents and others that this was like corrective. It maybe was part of adolescence that this child was just acting out of not their typical behavior. But I
Mm.
think where the political climate has changed, and it's the fear as being looked as racist
Yeah,
or anti-Semitic, I think now whether it's parents, staff, or just community members are kind of like want to stay away from that.
yeah.
So much so that they're defending the behavior, the activity that has happened, but they're also very fearful of
Mm.
getting the help or going to a community event for the fear that it kind of solidifies that, yes, perhaps you are racist or I hope I'm making sense, but I feel like what I've seen through the schools and what I've have learned about is where you may have had parents more willing to get the help for their child or to acknowledge that this was inappropriate. It's a little more defensive, like this
Yeah.
isn't my child, that wasn't anti-Semitic, right? So I'm wondering in this how that has played an effect of trying to avoid a label, but just avoid the fact that it's been said, as opposed to before it was like, let's have a conversation as to why the behavior happened.
Yeah, no, I thank you for making that point because I think that's a really important factor. And it's something that the coalition in our core values really is trying to educate about in terms of how important it is to separate the behavior from the individual. Because we definitely, when we started this work 3 years ago, saw this phenomenon that when these incidents happen, when a hateful incident happens, when you track online, whether it's a local, parents group or when you see on social media a reaction, you often have, even with egregious incidents, you have a parent weigh in to say, well, it's just kids, like trying to minimize the behavior. And what you hear behind it is that parent is afraid usually a parent of a teenager, a white parent of a teenager, who's afraid of their child doing something, something that is offensive, and that they would get canceled for it. So they're thinking about their child and the fear of their child being canceled. And what we've talked about with the coalition is we have to begin with condemning the behavior. We have to condemn the behavior, but not the child, right? You can separate this behavior, but we have to start with the behavior, because if we start by minimizing or not using the name or etc., what we're saying is, first of all, we're not centering the person who's been targeted. We're not focusing on that. We're centering other people, and we're not addressing the behavior and the severity of it. So condemning the behavior and supporting the target is number one. But then at the same time, believing in the ability of every student to grow and change and do better. We can do both of those things at the same time. We can really take this behavior seriously, and we cannot, cancel or condemn, the student. And I think that approach we've heard a lot of positive reaction to because of what you're saying, Antonia. It's not just the parent, like white parents, who might feel this way, but school leaders who feel this way. They don't want a child, they want to shy away from maybe naming the thing because they're nervous about how, what's going to happen next to a growing student. One other thing that we've seen as a potential way to address what you're talking about is, looking at codes of conduct in schools. And we've heard, as part of the work over the past 3 years, school districts, one in particular, that treats these actions, talks to their educators as if they're mandatory reporters on these issues. Now, they're not legally mandatory reporters, but they say to them, we are acting as if we are. So if you hear something, a slur, something that's happened, it needs to be reported and documented. But then we will figure out specifically what happens in step 2. Like it's going to be different depending who the student is and the circumstance. So I think that, but keeping track of the incidents is very important, and coming up with a policy for that accounts for some of this, because I think that's a big challenge. And if we don't start if it doesn't get reported, we can't see trends and we can't address it. And these things are just whispered and said and talked about, and you don't, and it puts a lot of power in the hands of the educator, or, you know, to say, well, Jimmy's a nice kid and he's just was kidding around. Well, you know, if there's a mandatory reporting, it's treated as a mandatory reporting. Well, we mark the incident down and then we figure out what's going on, right? I hope, does that answer what you're, okay. Yeah, but that's definitely a theme that we've heard. I think that Reverend Lloyd had raised his hand and I talked too long.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's good to see you.
Good
Thank
to
you
see
for
you.
your work. A couple things. One is certainly let's call it what it is. This circling of the wagon, and
Mhm.
that's what takes place. And what we're talking about is that and then a tribalism operates. So
Mm.
I understand the protection of a child, protection of my child,
Mhm.
emphasis on my, no doubt
Mhm.
about it. But what we're doing is that we are empowering a culture here where I have people in my school system, but other institutions as well, that are operating out of ignorance, therefore operating out of fear. And the very place that ought to be a place where we are exploring and this educational enterprise becomes a haven for protectionism going on.
Mhm.
And too many times I've seen where those who are victims are victimized all over again
Mm.
in the process.
Mm.
And we still go with this idea. I mean, basically, those who have the loudest voice, who can
Mm.
rally the most at the table, get the attention, and that's what we do.
Mhm.
And it's certainly we operate in a national narrative that is not helpful.
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
and the long term is it's just it's crazy. It's what have you. But let me put this on the table. And Marion, a question I have for you later on maybe is the whole idea of what I've seen in terms of ICE coming to the community, and I appreciate the statements or what have you. But the point for which they actually sit outside the churches, which is breeding ground, and waiting for folk to come to church, videotaping them. I mean, I've literally seen it around me, and I've got probably 10 churches immediately within a block around me that are my Asian brown churches, and that's what's happening. So I just say that to you in terms of the ramifications there. The capacity to get from your car to the church door is crazy.
Mm.
But let me go back a little bit, maybe what you were saying, Christine, that is this. I've been struck since this weekend with the tweets and what have you that the president said in terms of the bullying
Mhm.
and the repercussions of that. And and I can't be dismissive of it that, oh, well, he just does this to everybody. This is outrageous. And what part of that has been the silence that I have from my white counterparts
Mm.
to what was said. So I'm sitting in my church having to take it and console my folk who literally feel threatened, unsafe, and the absence of voices of folk who in this country, white folk are the ones who still have power. And the
Mhm.
absence of them to say, I haven't had a phone call yet that somebody called me up who, in terms of implicit positions of power, to say, Reverend Lord, how your people doing?
Mm.
After what was said.
Mhm.
There is. See, so we've got work to do. I'm going to tell you right now, we really do, because
Yeah.
this is unacceptable. And this goes to the very core of who we are as a people.
Mhm.
And I said, where are all these? And yet, they're the first person to call me saying, Reverend Lloyd, will you be an ally for me in
Mm.
whatever their cause is? So
Mhm.
I'm not in a competition here about allyship, but I am saying we can become very blinded. And maybe we're just all just so beat up so much in these last year and a half, you know what I mean, that we just can't react. And I'm
Mm.
saying, but I said, this went to the very core of who I am as a person and the
Yeah.
congregation I have, and the people looking at me saying, Reverend Lloyd, what in the world? So
Yeah.
those are my comments I throw out for you.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that, Reverend Lloyd. And I hear how much, and I think your perspective of being a leader who is both affected and experiencing what is happening in our communities, in our country, but then also being somebody who is supporting so many people who are in those, I mean, how incredibly hard and lonely and that can be. And I think you get to, we're going to be talking about this later. One of the big pieces of feedback that we've heard in the past 3 years is we need, and I know, because I've heard you speak, and I know the community work that you believe in the good, that there are a lot of good people out there. But I hear what you're saying, and what a lot of people feel is if there's good people out there and I don't hear them, and they're not vocal, and they're not engaging as allies, it's as if they don't exist, like it's these voices of hate and division are so loud, and the voices of good and allyship need to be just as loud, and need to be just as strategic. And what we say at Spark is that these issues have been politicized, but they are not political. These are human issues. These are human rights issues, the right to be treated with dignity and respect. And so what we've heard is we need tools and skills to become effective allies and active bystanders. And so we have a program coming up, Spark does, with Loretta Ross. It's called Calling In: How to Make Change with Those You'd Rather Cancel, is the subtitle. But we're also going to be hosting some free bystander, I know, with active bystander training with, I know Quabbin Mediation has presented to this group and said great things about you all. So really what you're getting to, Reverend Lloyd, there are a lot of people out there that say, I want to help, I want to do something, but don't know what to do, might be like nervous, afraid, etc. I think you got to one of the things that I've seen is that I think people often feel that to be an effective ally, an effective active bystander, they need to stand up in the middle of something happening and make a very dramatic speech. They need to do something, that may put themselves in immediate harm's way, etc. But what I've also seen is just, you alluded to, a phone call. A phone call where it's actually low risk for somebody, but it shows somebody that I'm with you. I see you. I see how hard this might be. What can I do for you? Those acts of allyship are also very important. They look different, but I think they're undervalued. And we want to, at Spark, we see this as a movement, and the Anti-Bullying Coalition, a movement which requires, frankly, action. It's not just building awareness. I think we know how harmful all of this is. I think and what are we going to do about it? I think that's part of what I think you got to the heart of what we're hearing. So I appreciate that. Anything else before I'm just going to move on to the next. So what we've heard from our community organizations, not the schools, that what are they struggling with during this time? And one of them is to have a safe space, a brave space to address these issues as a community. When we've had our Metro West Anti-Bullying Coalition forums, I know Lynn can attest to this. It's like everybody takes a collective exhale and says, we can talk about these issues without being afraid we're saying the wrong thing, without, we can lean in and we can just really, these are complex. And when people are afraid of saying the wrong thing, it's a huge impediment to effectively addressing things. So when you bring everybody in the same room who have a goal of addressing these issues and are having maybe some challenges in doing so, and it's that we've created this space where it's free to talk about, we're going to strategize, we have each other's back, we know everybody has good intentions. It's I think we've gotten the feedback that it's really valuable and freeing. The other thing is community organizations, just like the schools, are just so more busy than ever for a million reasons. And so what we can do with the coalition is bring in experts. We'll do the legwork. We'll find the people that are helpful. We'll listen to you. We'll, and we'll do the Zoom, bring in a Zoom meeting. So like access to that, access to experts, access to research, and then time. I just think that people they just don't have time to do this in addition to serving their people, to do this work. And so however, what we can do as a coalition to, to help, again, to do some of that legwork that might be needed. We get emails asking for assistance on different things, and we're really happy to provide that support. I don't know if there are other things. I mean, these bullets are not based on a specific survey we asked, but our conversations over the past 3 years. So I don't know if there's anything that you all in your positions that I'm missing that might be of value to you, like why the Anti-Bullying Coalition might be of value to your organization.
I'm just gonna hop in as well, because I think we're approaching our time. We would love it if anything comes up, if you have anything you think would be valuable for us in our efforts, you can pop it in the chat or come off mute. We'll take any feedback, however you're willing to give it. It is the heart of what we do. It's the feedback we get guides how we move forward. So just a couple of things, community feedback here. One person said skill-based learning, how to intervene in moments of bullying in a proactive way, was a positive thing that came out of some of the trainings. One of the big things we've been working on over the last few years is a website, a place to house all of the resources we gather, programming that's coming up, just to have it all in one place. So if a parent comes to you and says, my child is being bullied, I don't know what to do. Well, we created some tip sheets with steps on what the resources are available in that situation. So that's all housed on our website. Everything's in English right now, but we are in the process of getting them translated to Spanish, Portuguese, and Mandarin. So that hopefully by the summer, we'll have those translations. So we're really excited, and we're constantly trying to add more resources to this website. So I encourage you all to have a look, use it, recommend it, because that's what it's there for. It's there for communities to have a place to turn, to get information on what's available to them. This is an example of a couple of the tip sheets we have on the website. Taking action against hate, what community members can do. If your child experiences identity-based bullying or hate, a parent caregiver tip sheet, and it goes into detail on steps that families can take in when they're faced with this situation. Oh, Scott, you have a question?
No, just a comment. So, and thank you for your work on this and sharing this information. Our district also just partnered recently with the Celtics, Project 351, and that just that helps school leaders and students to develop these same skills. And so we're rolling that out soon. But this is great work. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So one of the programs we had fairly recently was the Attorney General's office talking about, as Christine mentioned earlier, sexting, cyberbullying, and all the new stuff with AI laws. Another program we had was Lenny Learning, and that was based on input we receive. Teachers say, when there's a swastika, there's a response that's required. You have to notify families. You have to also figure out how to use that as a teaching moment for your staff and your faculty in terms of the impact these things have. And it's very time consuming. So we had a really powerful program by Lenny Learning, which is an AI generated site where you can develop really powerful lessons quickly addressing these issues. So, and that came directly from listening to what the needs were out there. So that's a way to tackle the time issue that's often a factor. And we have so much more to come. Again, if there's any way Spark can be helpful, the Metro West Anti-Bullying Coalition can be helpful to you and what you are doing, we would love to hear from you. And if you have any information you'd like to see reflected in the on our website to be listed as a resource, please feel free to let us know. We're always looking to grow that information so that is as robust of a resource that it can be for communities and families and schools to use, because times are hard. And I think we all need a place to turn, and that's what we're trying to provide for everyone. I don't know if there's any more questions. Oh, Christine mentioned this calling in. This is going to be a very, very powerful, powerful program. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Loretta Ross, but she herself is such a force. She is a survivor of rape and incest who has worked with rapists. She is a Black woman who has worked with white supremacists, and she has a lot to say about the power of calling someone in as opposed to calling them out. So I think it's going to be a very powerful program that all of us will learn something from, especially today in these times.
I dropped that in the chat. If anyone wants to register, they can follow the link.
Thank you, Antonia. So ways to stay informed. You can join the coalition and have all of our up-to-date information. You can also follow Spark Kindness as well. There's a lot of educational programming we do through Spark as well. So those are two great ways to stay informed on everything that we have going on. Some pictures from our last anti-bullying forum. We have another, our next one is coming up in May. We'd love to invite you all, so sign up on our, either at Spark or on our Metro West Anti-Bullying Forum. I think that's it for us.
Thank you both. Thank you. That was great information. Appreciate it. All right, now we are turning to Araceli Lara, who is the partnership manager at Right to Be. And Right to Be is a national organization, and its mission is ending harassment in all forms. And what would seem to be a goal we'd all share, building a world where everybody can feel safe and respected. And in her role, Araceli develops and nurtures collaborations with community groups, with schools, businesses, and government partners to bring Right to Be's evidence-based training on bystander intervention, anti-harassment, and resilience to a really wide range of audiences. She is committed to building some of the things we've just been talking about, really practical, accessible tools that empower everyday people to be able to respond to hate and bias, to support the people who've been targeted, and to help shift the culture towards greater dignity and belonging. So Araceli, thanks for being with us this morning.
No, thank you for having me and sharing this time with me. And let me share my screen real quick. I do a quick presentation. All right, hopefully you all can see my screen. Perfect. And thank you for that introduction. Yeah, Right to Be, we turned 20 years old last year. So we've been doing this for quite some time, and we started off focused on bystander intervention, and we've trained over 4 million people on bystander intervention. But we've seen the way that hate and harassment impacts communities change over those years. And right now we're seeing a big demand and need for bystander intervention training to support our immigrant communities. And so I'm here to share a little bit more about what we're seeing and what we're doing. and hopefully provide a free resource that we're providing for communities, and also learn about any needs or resources that you may be seeing in your communities. And so I want to share a little bit more about what this topic covers. We talk about our 5 Ds of bystander intervention. That is a core methodology across all of our bystander trainings. We've adapted that to talk about a variety of communities, whether that is to stop anti-Asian American and xenophobic harassment. And we saw a big moment back in 2020 around how we could support those communities, but also anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. And we've done some training for youth and educators as well around how they can be active bystanders in their spaces. But we take those core 5 Ds now and also talk about what does this look like when we're witnessing anti-immigrant hate and harassment, and also the presence of ICE. And so the simple tools that we talk about are distraction, which can be pulling away attention from a situation, right? This could be pretending like you know someone, asking them for directions, trying to disrupt that interaction. But if ICE is present, we've seen folks try to give red cards and try to remind folks of their rights. We've seen whistles to call attention to the moment as well. We talk about delegating and documenting. These two can be reporting incidents and safely recording. So in that training, we provide tips around how they can record safely, some things that language that they can use to make sure that they're reminding folks of their rights and to keep themselves safe, and then tips on who they can report, whether that's immigration hotlines, lawyer hotlines, and trying to encourage them to also research things more locally, because we collect a lot of national resources. But after all our trainings, we also encourage folks to look for local resources as well. And then we talk about delay and direct. So delay, checking in with someone after an incident. We mentioned earlier, giving someone a call, trying to have that conversation with them. But when ICE is present, that could be offering to call a person's family member or a lawyer for them, trying to take down any information, phone numbers that you can to help support them. And then direct, this is, directly saying something in the moment, which is often harder and less comfortable for folks. So we want to remind them that that's not the only tool. And when it is ICE, we don't encourage folks to intervene directly, which is why we give them the 4 other Ds. And this training we've been offering for over a year now. But of course, we've seen a big demand recently. And so in January, we started offering this twice a week. And last year, we were seeing maybe 100 folks show up to these trainings. We've had an average of 500 folks show up to those free public sessions. And so just in January alone, we trained almost 2,000 people from our free public trainings. We also do private trainings, and we work with schools, churches, workplaces to train individuals on bystander intervention. But just from free public trainings, we saw almost 2,000 folks attend. And then out of those folks, we saw 98% of them reported that they would recommend this training to their friend, and why we're seeing still a growing demand for these trainings. And then 76% reported having actually used those tools after they attended the training. And so some things that we're doing to keep up with this demand is, again, offering those twice a week, offering sponsorship opportunities for communities that want to sponsor this training for their local communities. We've worked with churches to offer both in-person and virtual trainings. And then we launched a press release with our partners to publish the series. We have anticipated to continue doing those 2 sessions a week, at least through March. We're still seeing a lot of demand and also growing interest in other topics. And then we shared our training as part of the 10 Steps campaign, led by Stacey Abrams, as an action that folks can take. And then we're discussing these trainings with cities, both just within our network and then also as our partnership with FIFA around the World Cup, and understanding what concerns these cities may be having as we get closer to these dates, understanding that there's a lot of fear for folks to do their everyday activities, and much more when we're going to see a global presence. I have a couple more slides, but any thoughts or questions as I go through, feel free to unmute or raise your hand. Can't see everyone, unfortunately. And I wanted to share some free upcoming trainings that we have. These are just the 2 that we have this week. Like I said, we're doing 2 a week. And so if you wanna, I can drop the link in the chat here for as well. But you can sign up for any training. You're welcome to share this with your community. And then I have a couple of testimonials here. And one is from Emily May, our president and co-founder. And I could share a little bit of anecdotal feedback as well, as they do a lot of our calls with folks who are interested in booking private training, is that, we're not seeing what I'm used to seeing as far as social justice focused organizations or maybe DEI councils. I'm really seeing everyone wanting to show up in this moment and wanting to train their communities. And so that's why we're offering so many of these free trainings, so that whether it is a small organization or a large organization, we can keep folks feeling empowered and feeling safe when we know that they want to be able to take an action to show up as allies in this moment. Sorry, I'm not a facilitator, so I don't do. Oh, and here are some other topics that we talk about that we're also seeing a growing demand for. So conflict de-escalation is a popular follow-up for us for bystander intervention, and right now we're seeing a lot of folks getting ready for protests. So again, we want to give them some clear tools that they can use to de-escalate any tense moments. But we're also seeing a lot of nonprofits interested in digital safety and thinking about being targeted for their work, whether it is for supporting immigrant communities or any other targeted community. And so we're offering some online harassment prevention training, and how do you respond if you or a colleague is facing online harassment. And then I also wanted to highlight, we also do training in support of Affinity Month. So we have one coming up on stopping anti-Black harassment in the workplace. And this one is actually in partnership with our New York City Commission of Gender Equity. We did a 10-part series with them on supporting all our different communities. And I think this is the last one in our series with them. So that is, again, another free resource that you're welcome to share and attend. And then I just want to highlight some new topics. We talked, I think, 2 years ago with this group. We've had a lot of new topics come up. Targeted violence is one that we're seeing an increased interest in. We partnered with John Jay, the criminal justice team there, to think about, we call it our 3 Cs. So not the 5 Ds, the 3 Cs. We're seeing targeted violence was really impulsive, right? And so there's some patterns that we can look at as warning signs. And if we look at that, that allows us to open the door for prevention. And so our work is in prevention. We want to think about what are ways that we can prevent targeted violence. We're also seeing an increase in political violence. And so that's another thing that we're also interested in seeing if that is something that other communities are interested in looking at, to think about how we can empower communities to respond to that rise. Like I mentioned, we have a lot more digital safety offerings, as well as an active shooter training, and then some more workplace trainings as well, to really empower us to show up into spaces that are welcoming and inclusive for everyone. And so we have an emotional intelligence training. We have a calling people in training. So I'm very interested in the workshop that you all share. And we also had a training that pairs really well with this around accountability and repair. And what do you do when you do screw up? How do you move through and how do you respond as an individual? And then I just want to share a couple of ways that we've partnered with organizations. So beyond free training and private offerings, we can create campaigns with organizations. We just did a series with LA versus Hate to train the trainer models for their local community organizations. And again, they're also preparing for the World Cup, and knowing that folks want to be prepared around how we keep our public spaces safe. And then we translated their curriculum into 5 different languages, and a video as well that is available in multiple languages. And I can share that link in the chat here, where we talk about the 5 Ds. And we're also looking at how we work with schools. So we partnered with Chicago Public Schools to train their educators to bring in our Right to Be Youth curriculum into their schools, which is a 5 to 13 lesson curriculum around how to be an active bystander, but also how do you take care of yourself, how do you build resilience, and how do you respond if you were called in for bullying or harassment. And then we give them a discussion guide to also think about how can they lead peer-to-peer conversations around what it means to be a bystander, and what does it look like for them to take those actions. And so we're always looking for more partners. If anyone's interested in thinking about schools and how we can bring this, we offer some free discussion guides for youth to think about what the 5 Ds look like in action. And I have to run to another meeting in a couple of minutes, but I did want to take any questions or any thoughts that folks may have.
Sally, on
Questions, comments?
I just had a quick question. On the Zoom, is it in different languages? On some of the immigration?
On the free trainings that we're offering?
Yeah.
Yeah, those right now, the ones that I shared are all in English, but we do sometimes offer translated sessions. And so when you register, you can just kind of, you'll be able to see if it's available in different languages.
All right. Thank you so much, Araceli. I want to thank people for being here. And before we go, though, I do just want to go back to Reverend Lloyd's question about the surrounding areas of places. That continues to be an issue. It's the same thing with courthouses, even when, I sued ICE in 2018 and we had that injunction, they were meticulous in following the rule that they couldn't be on the courthouse property, but they stood down the block. We had a lot of conversation about what happens when they're, down the street from the hospital and whatever. And obviously there's a clash between where we can tell people to be and where they are. So, that's something we've been talking with the governor's office a lot, with the legislature about, they will go as close as they can go. And that's just really the problem. And I get it. I totally get it. We had an incident in Framingham just the other day where they were outside that glass kind of enclosure that you go in to get to the courthouse, but they were on the curb across the street. So and there really does, I want to be honest, I don't think there's a way to say where that's going to be, because they're going to be right at the edge of, you said 500 feet, they'd be at 501. So I don't think there's a lot we're going to be able to do about that piece.
I agree totally
I'm
with
sorry,
you said. I totally agree. It's very limited what we can do, but I do think we are to, when we talk about the legislation and what we're doing, that we also put a caveat that says there's a danger to get to where you need to get to.
Right.
There's a danger to get to the safe place. So people know, because you're right. I mean, I can't police all that, but I know I'm at firsthand where they are literally videotaping my worship service, videotaping folk in the park across to see who's coming down the street to get to church. And then they're out there 15 minutes before and basically going after folk. So that people don't have a false sense of security.
Right.
All right,
Right.
would be helpful. Thanks.
We've been telling people, even people coming to the courthouse, we probably can keep you safe in here, but don't go to Dunkin' Donuts across the street, because I can't
Please
tell you
don't.
that's going to be fine. Which is a terrible message to people, because obviously you can't jet yourself to the place and drop in, but
Right.
that is the issue. Anybody have anything else? All right, our next meeting is March 25th. So stay warm. It's actually pretty nice today. More snow coming, but take care, everybody. And thank you so much. Thanks, Antonia. Take care.